Hey everyone, good morning. I'm Hannah. I'm covering for Christina. We are live on YouTube. I just wanted to let you all know, and we will give folks a couple more minutes to join.
Thanks, Hannah. I'm going to be off camera for most of this.
No problem. Thank you for letting me know, Stephen. Hi everyone, good morning. I'm Hannah. If you have not met me, I'm covering for Christina. I will turn it over to you, board member Hawken Hall, and just let me know when you want to get started. We are live streaming on YouTube. So I see board member Tatum. Just let me know when you want to kick things off.
Okay, will do. Thank you. We'll wait maybe another minute and then we'll get started. Thanks.
And I said this a moment ago, but I'll be off camera most of this, but I am listening and will chime in if I want to.
Since this meeting is at a different time than we usually have it, it's in the morning. I'm not sure how many board members are going to be able to make it since there is me and Mr. Tatum, and I believe Mr. Mills will be joining us shortly, but I think we can go ahead and get started since it is live streamed and recorded, so folks can always catch back up whatever they miss. So, Hannah, is it okay if I get started?
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, good morning, everyone. It is June 13th, 2025. Welcome to the Hartford Board of Education Finance and Audit Committee meeting. We today will be reviewing a contract, and then we will also be going through our monthly financials through April 2025. And then we'll be talking about the budget for a budget amendment for the 2025-2026 budget. We've received some updates on city funding and state funding, so we wanted to talk through the options that we have on that. and talk about next steps, hopefully so that we can vote on an amendment at the meeting next week. So with that, I think I will turn it over to Superintendent or CFO Richard.
Well, CFO Richard, and then when we get to talking about the updates about the budget, I will do a quick backdrop and then turn it over again. But we also do have a frontline contract, which is first on the agenda.
Which I think, Ed, are you handling that?
Yes, for the
Okay.
frontline contract.
Yeah, I think we can start with that.
So we have the frontline contract on the agenda. We have a PowerPoint presentation. Hannah, can you assist with that?
Yes, can you all see the presentation on my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
So the first item is a renewal for our frontline technologies contract. We've utilized this frontline system for approximately 5 years. This is in terms of the work groups in district that utilize this system. It's split between labor relations, the Office of School Leadership. And if you could advance that slide. Slide 2, we speak to how the renewal of this contract is connected to the district strategies enabling systematic processes. What you'll hear as we advance through this presentation is the importance of a time management system, as well as how we do employee evaluations for our certified staff. If we could go to slide 3. The total cost of this contract is $164,503.73. As indicated earlier, it's split under the labor relations team, where we use this for time and attendance and absence management. The cost is $106,032.96. And on the Office of School Leadership side, the cost is $58,470. I'll talk a bit more on the next slide about how we utilize this system. Frontline does our employee accrual processes. It does our sub finder. So if a staff member calls out, Frontline automatically identifies the opening. There's an app that our substitutes utilize where they could fill openings in buildings that is automatically refreshed when a teacher calls out. So with the way the frontline system works is when you call out sick or off for some other reason, it indicates whether or not you need a sub to fill that position, which then in turn generates either a phone call to a sub or updates the app. That's on the sub finder side. Time and attendance. It manages our employee accruals across work groups. We have 12 bargaining units here at Harvard Public Schools. The system has the ability to manage all the intricacies of how our different employees may accrue time. All our employees don't accrue time at the same frequencies, so it has the complexity to make sure that the accruals are accurate across work groups. An easy example there would be how teachers and administrative staff are front-loaded in some instances, whereas other staff members may accrue on a monthly basis. The system has the ability to do that. It also does the time attendance across our work groups. And I'll tag in Chief Barney to speak to the professional growth aspect of it.
Good morning, everybody. So the professional growth aspect of the frontline system right now currently focuses on the administrator and the teacher evaluation process. We will be moving also to the paraeducator being utilized through frontline as well, because this is in alignment with state guidelines and policies connected to strengthening the evaluation process with a clear documentation of a plan that then has goals that paraeducators, administrators, and teachers set. Within that, there's a clear action plan to develop and achieve the goals. And then there are clear feedback and support cycles that are all documented within the frontline system. The data is continuous also. It is year over year. So we can go back at least 12 years within this platform and see a teacher and administrator's growth over time. We can also see if there were measures for support? What were those measures? And did they meet those indicators? And again, this is in full alignment with the state guidelines and policies around the teacher, administrator, and paraeducator evaluation plan.
And if we could go to slide 5. This kind of further unpacks what I was indicating earlier in terms of the ability that this frontline system has to support absence and substitute management. The scope of that includes unlimited account creation for additional HPS staff, data imports across school locations, system integrations with time and attendance. It has the ability to run reports across different school years for our varied employees. So there's a huge data reporting aspect of it, and the frontline organization also provides technical support. Spoke a bit to this, but this is the time and attendance piece that is also part of the system. Chief Barney.
Yes, thanks. Thanks, Mr. Olson. So yes, in addition, you can see that the professional growth plan through Frontline also allows for unlimited account creation. So we can add in our paraeducators, new staff as they come in to the district on a rolling basis can be added as well, so that they start off with setting goals, whether it be if they enter at the beginning of the year or if they enter in the mid-year. That all the evaluations are stored within this platform and can be easily accessed for review, for support, to help develop professional learning plans. It's a consistent implementation of the process over several years, so staff is very familiar with the process, knows how to utilize the system. We do track and report the data on a quarterly basis. And then we also have unlimited technical support as well. So if there is an issue with any of the forms, with anything with the operating system, they are on call 24 hours a day and can help support and problem solve. And they also, as a part of the technical support, will build out any new forms, any new processes that we need in order to make the teacher evaluation system successful.
So in closing, we'll add that this product, my team has been to workshops on time and attendance. This product is utilized in other school districts. This is the 5th year that we've been utilizing the product. And the product is essential for this organization as we track both employee time and work across with employee leave, as well as the SubFinder components of it. And as Chief Barney indicates, the benefits on the employee evaluations and compliance with state law and regulations. And we're happy to answer any questions the team has.
Mr. Wilson and Chief Barney. Mr. Walker.
Good morning. Great presentation. I want to ask questions about the tools, performance, and sustainment. So I don't know if we would answer it in this form, but I guess my comment and question is, where can we begin to get some reporting of what are the enhancements that have occurred, with the tool over the years, maybe over this past 12-month period? What's been user feedback? What I'm typically tying into, if we've been using the tool for 5 years, my sense is people are enjoying using it, or they find a hiccup or two. That's something we should probably be tracking. And then out of that probably came an enhancement. It would kind of tie into the quality of that technical support that we're getting. And I'd like to see that reported on. If not in this venue, then let's find the venue to kind of report on that, because it would answer the questions at this juncture as we're going to approve this tool for next year. Something that says how happy our staff with it, and how happy are we with the tool? And that would be kind of my question and comment. Either Ed or Caitlin, free to kind of respond to that.
Thank you, Member Walker. I could certainly start. We could, in terms of improvements that the system has made over the years, we could certainly get that information and provide it to the team. I could tell you in terms of the team that manages it, my direct team that kind of manages and works closely with Frontline and in terms of things we have to implement. The team has been pleased with the product. I could tell you this has been generally a very challenging year. I think we had approximately about 4 or 5 contracts that we finalized. And I think this is responsive to what you're saying. So there's a back end. When we talk about contracts, there's typically a time and attendance piece to that, whether we're talking about changes to employee sick time or even changes in law this year as it pertains to Connecticut paid leave, which was a huge thing to try to implement. That had several implications to how employees have their time, track their time, or draw down their time. We were able to create separate categories in this particular system. They were very responsive to the changes in the law that we had to quickly operationalize on the back end. And then as we walk through our contract negotiations in real time, we're still having these conversations right now in terms of changing the way employees might be accruing time or additional time categories or the things we might be needing to flag. They've been responsive, and the system has the capacity for all those kind of nuances that we're trying to make sure that we're in alignment with across the 12 different bargaining units. So in terms of the product on the user side of it, we've been pleased with that. In terms of what they've done on the back end, we could certainly get that information for the team. Absolutely.
Yeah. Quick feedback, Chair. Yeah, Attorney Wilson, that's what I'm speaking about. And what you just said is something that's worth a couple of slides. You can speak to how that relationship is still working, as exemplified by those changes, and probably over the 12-month period makes sense. No need to try to look for changes over all time, because we're approving this thing on a year-by-year basis. And so in some ways, I'm just trying to assess how that relationship's been sustained and maintained, and if your team's still happy, and as you said, is your team able to successfully implement these changes in a timely way so it doesn't interrupt the end user's ability to use the tool in compliance with state law and district needs. So thank you for that explanation.
Mr. Walker, any other questions from fellow board members? No. I have a quick question. How does the cost compare to prior years? Do they have a built-in increase that we know about every year? I'm just trying to what we're seeing year over year.
Can I defer to CFO Richard on that? I don't have the across the 5-year average.
I don't have it right now either, but we could definitely pull that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. All right. Seeing no other questions on Frontline, we will move to the monthly financial update. CFO Richard.
Yes. Happy Friday the 13th, everyone. Great day to talk about the budget. I'm going to pull up my screen. So yeah, we have 2 key agenda items. One is FY25 and the other is FY26. So I'm going to go through the monthly update and the FY25 piece of that. I do want you to have that information, but I want to make sure we spend most of our time on FY26. So I'll move through FY25, take any questions, and then we'll head to FY26. So in terms of our monthly update, this is based on the April month-end data. Again, just as a reminder, we are anticipating spending significantly less this year compared to last year due to the loss of ESSER funds. That's about 46 million less in total. Based on our year-end projection, and I'll give a bit more detail on this in a few slides, we're anticipating closer to a $2 million deficit for the end of this year. Last time that was closer to 4. So we've been tracking, working to mitigate some of that, partly just due to certain encumbrances that won't actually be manifesting as expenses, and we continue to track that. In terms of that April month-end data, we, at the end of April this year compared to last year, have spent about $43 million less This is driven by less in salaries and benefits, which is expected due to position reductions and high vacancy rates. There's also about 31 million less in non-salary expenses, which I'll get into on the next slide. I do want to give the same caveat I gave last time. Part of that is driven by decreases in tuition payments. While we are expecting a decrease in tuition relative to general education magnet, because this was the year the cap went into place, we are anticipating special education tuition to be higher than prior years. So part of that is just timing of when those bills get paid. In May month end, and then of course, end of year, we'll have kind of the full picture of that. This just shows how we're trending compared to last year, overall expecting to spend less overall, and thus far we have spent about 42 million less at this time in April compared to last year. When we look at it by category, every single category we're spending less on. So again, about 11 million less in salaries across certified and non-certified. And then you can see about 4 million less in contracts. A lot of that, again, is the loss of ESSER funding. About 20 million less on system-wide purchase services. Again, part of that driven by tuition, so part of that is timing. About 5 million less on equipment, also driven by the loss of ESSER funding. And then finally, slightly less on fringe, which was anticipated alongside the reductions in salary and just reductions in positions generally. So the takeaway is overall, we're spending less than last year across all categories. We continue to monitor as we get closer to the end of the year, and we'll have the May month end for you next time. And when we look at that year-end projection, so again, this is where we say, let's take everything we know for salaries and benefits for the rest of the year. And for non-salary, we'll look at what we've expensed and encumbered so far. We're tracking towards about a $2 million deficit here, so slightly less than last time, and continue to look for any opportunities we have to mitigate that further. The drivers are the same as what they've been over the course of the past several months. Unrealized revenue, and then additions to the budget, mostly in those fixed expenses, tuition, transportation, utilities. And we were intentional about for next year trying to base our budget off of some of those higher numbers so that we're taking into account kind of the most accurate picture we have. And then it's mitigated by higher than anticipated vacancy savings, grant revenues that are now included, including a little bit from the state funding for excess costs that took place this year. So that's where we stand on the FY25 financials. A couple more updates on FY25. One is that today is actually the final day for drawdown requests from the state for grant funds. So that's when we submit to the state. Here's how we have spent our grant funds and then to get reimbursed. And as of this week, we've successfully submitted all fund requests, which is super exciting. This is a huge milestone for the team. This was actually something too that, and I'll talk about the Public Works report in a minute. One of the main recommendations from there was to update that grants monitoring process. And so we're really using this experience to learn from how we can be even more proactive next year. And what you see on the right is actually the comprehensive finance calendar we're developing for school sites where they can see all of the finance related dates over the course of the whole year, with one of those being a monthly grant monitoring touch point where they'll get more information on what's been spent so far, what they're planning, how that aligns to their school plan and our strategic plan, alongside everything else finance related. So we're excited that we were able to accomplish that, and we have plans for next year to be even more proactive around that process and make sure we're doing a monthly monitoring. And we've been working closely with CSD on that, and they've been helpful in supporting us and are looking forward to the new process. Couple more slides and I'll pause because that will end the FY25 piece. So other update is that Public Works gave their final report to the state at the CSD board meeting this past Wednesday. This was their technical assistance report. So this is where they described post recommendations, what the work looked like with us in terms of then supporting us around implementing the recommendations. I have linked there, and this is on the board docs now, and we'll make sure you have it. I've linked to the report there and also the recording of the meeting from Wednesday. And just a couple quotes highlighted here. Overall, the takeaway was that we've been working on the recommendations and working to update our processes, improve the culture around that. And there was a shout out for developing a tracking system. So we have every recommendation, who owns it, where it's at, what the next steps are. So that was kind of the takeaway. They also talked about just helping other districts with some of this work, knowing that it's a need in general across the state. And of course, we started on a lot of these pieces. That calendar is an example of it, but there's also just the next steps. It's going to take time to work through all of this. And these were just in the report, some of the concrete next steps they shared that summarize some of the recommendations. Nothing new, largely just policy procedure updates, making sure we're looking at internal controls, efficiencies, how we use Munis better. And then reflecting on what we've already implemented. So reflecting on the budget process, reflecting on the grants monitoring process. And the last piece just being collaborating with both internally, but also with the city to kind of align our services. So those were some of the takeaways from their report. Again, you can read the full thing, but that was a summary of what was shared out with CSD at their Wednesday board meeting. Okay, I'm going to pause
CFO
there.
Richards, can I just
Yeah,
also
yeah.
add one more thing
Please, yeah.
relative to the reporting? There was, I wouldn't use the word frustration, but there was a comment by a state team member that was focusing on the audit, and their takeaway was the complexity of the Munis system and how not just Hartford, but other many school systems, school districts use Munis, and how challenging it was for their team of auditors to quickly go in and make comparables. And so for what that's worth, I thought that was interesting that they were saying we would have finished earlier with the audit, but it was too cumbersome to understand the system. And so just want to say that that's something that we can't change, right? Munis is Munis, and that's just the system. And so they acknowledge that.
Thank you. Caitlin, are you set with 2025?
Yes,
Go
so
to
any
questions?
questions related to that?
Okay,
we could go.
perfect.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Mr. Walker?
Good morning. Caitlin, this is a great report. My comment is, some celebration focus on hitting that grants timeline. I'm just kind of requesting that you definitively do something with your team. Let's celebrate that win. I think that is a significant milestone. It's fantastic that the actual functioning of the finance function of Hartford Public Schools isn't the theme and the main concern. And Superintendent, thumbs up on the Munis comment. I mean, I love it when somehow the tool is the main aggravation they have and not the working relationship with our team and staff and Caitlin. Caitlin, let us know what celebration you and your team do to kind of really celebrate that win. It's worthy. I think it's a recognition to them.
Thank you. And yeah, I want to shout out, especially our director of budget and our new director of our manager of grants. They've been working so hard on this and are committed both to getting all the work done, but then always thinking about how can we do this better next time. And so just all credit goes to them. I'm so lucky to have them on the team and to be working alongside them. So yes, I will let you know what we do to celebrate because yeah, it was a huge milestone.
Board Member Walker, I appreciate you saying that. And there was a moment actually in the state board meeting in which a question was specifically raised by a board member about how the state Board of Education and the State Department of Ed essentially entered into this specific inquiry relative to public works. And that, right, the assumption was that there were millions and millions of dollars that were unspent, unutilized. And there was an explicit question that was raised. It wasn't directly answered. And so I do think that it is an opportunity. I think it's just important for someone, myself potentially, if I'm still, here during the next state board meeting to really answer that question directly of the board member. It wasn't answered directly relative to the savings or the monies that were recovered when it wasn't about recovering money. It was timelines. And still, again, I just want to put it on the record that Hartford Public Schools had an explicit plan, especially relative to ESSER funding, to spend down and did spend down those monies way before any of these inquiries started. So kudos totally to the team And I think it is very important for us to not just correct the record, but explain the nuances and the unique aspects of what it is to manage in a complex urban system.
Great, thank you very much. And just to continue the Love Fest of the finance team, I'm really grateful for all of your partnership around all this. I know how difficult your job is, and I appreciate that whenever we meet prior to these meetings to prepare and I have a question, you're like, I have a slide for that every single time. So you guys do a really great job, all of you. And it looks like I think Board Member Tatum was wondering what the names of the budget director and the grants manager are.
Yeah, so Ymir Soto Santa is our budget director who she's listening in right now, so she can hear all of the love. And then Jennifer Torres is our new manager of grants, who is out today, but I will make sure that she knows about all of the celebration.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Caitlin, and thank you to your team. Great work. So we're going to move on to 2026. And I just want to kick it off by saying that I know that the state, to balance budgets is incredibly difficult at the education level, at the city level, and at the state level. So as we talk through the next slides about some additional funding and assistance we're getting from the state, or sorry, from the city, and then what we ended up getting from the state, I just really want to recognize that I am personally very grateful for the city stepping up this year, helping us with the finances, and also for all the work that was done at the state level, all the advocacy done by our legislative and advocacy task force, just all the work done by Representative Khan, Speaker Ritter. I mean, I think people truly rallied around Hartford Public Schools this year. And, we did get additional funding for it, which is amazing. Obviously, we always wish for more, and also knowing that in this current climate that we live in which everything is uncertain at every level, based on what's kind of going on at the federal level and other just things going on in this crazy world that we live in. I realize it's incredibly difficult to balance budgets and make everyone happy and, fund everything at every level that we need. So with that said, I, truly thanks to the city and all the work, thanks to the state and all the work. And obviously, thank you to the administration here at Hartford Public Schools for all of your work. So with that, we've got some decisions to make. So I will turn it over back to CFO Richard to talk through what we've learned in the last, literally some of it within the last 12 hours. But we're going to move forward and figure out where to go next. So.
I'll say also a few words before CFO Richards. And CFO Richards, I know it's not on the slide, but if you can also do a quick hit on the assumptions that we made in our budget, just right to kind of level set and remind us all. Obviously, like our chairperson said, updates on state level action. I also echo the gratitude to everyone who was engaged in not just the advocacy, but the multiple meetings that we had with City Council, with the Finance Committee internally, with our community, with our SGCs, right? There was a lot of effort, as we do every year. But I think this was a year in which people in our community already had some level of understanding. And so it was a great opportunity for everyone to dig deeper into the functions, not just of how we develop our budget, but how just the funding structures work. So kudos to everyone and to the legislature also, because they took time, not just behind the scenes, but as for us to meet with us, to really understand what the pieces and the challenges are relative to Hartford Public Schools. And so I'm also deeply grateful for City Council and our mayor. I also would like to just in this conversation talk about the implications of the high risk reductions as well. And then if there is time, Chairperson Hockenhall, just to go back to beginning additional conversations around the shared services. I know that was something that we spoke about as we were kind of, getting to the first budget vote. And it's time now for us to, right now that things are kind of settling, to begin to talk about that. And then specifically for me is weaving any of those pieces explicitly into the strategic action plan that I will be delivering to you.
Okay, yeah, echo all the gratitude. It was so meaningful to see all the community engagement and city, state level related to this. So I'm gonna hit you with some numbers now. So this shows the updates on the state and city level relative to funding. So to start with, at the state level, we made an assumption in our budget that we would receive 5 million additional dollars from the state in revenue. This was based on, at the time, tracking the special ed legislation. I have a slide that shows all of the various legislative priorities we had and assumptions relative to those. But what's important for this piece is to know we were assuming 5 relative to that special education bill. The update is that the state passed the special education bill, I believe, last week. It will only, which we're really excited about, and actually in full funding would translate to $16 million for Hartford Public Schools. It includes a 50% weight for special education. I'll go more in the details, but the state is only funding that partially for next year, so it's only translating to about 3.4 million for us. And so what that means is, starting at the state level, we're getting 1.6 million less than what we had assumed. Again, still grateful for what we're getting, but that does create that gap. So that's at the state level, about a difference of 1.6 million. And again, we're going to go into the details. What is that grant? What can it be used for, et cetera? At the city level, we will be getting, our assumption was that we would get that original 3 million. So I think that was back in March, maybe, that was announced, and that's all we had in the budget was 3 million from the city. What we are now receiving as an update is that the city would give 1.5 million more on top of that in revenue. So a total of 4.5 million from the city. And there are some requests for how that money is used. We'll cover what that is in a few slides. There also is this piece around 3 million in additional funding that would come through cost savings associated with consolidated services. So part of what the superintendent mentioned, looking to see where there's efficiencies between the city and BOE, which we've talked about a bit, but this is the update, is that this would be 3 million in funding from working towards those cost savings. So a way to think about that is it's 1.5 million more in revenue, 3 million in reduced costs. So in terms of deficit mitigation, that's 4.5 million to work with. And again, we can go through the specific intents for that. But really the goal there is that some of that additional revenue from the city could be used to restore high-risk reductions. And some of those cost savings from shared services could be used to restore additional high-risk reductions and support that deficit with the state gap. Based on what we predicted versus what actually happened. So kind of twofold, in that sum total of city funds, both the savings and the revenue, would help support high risk reduction, restoration, and mitigating that state gap. Okay. We're going to go into more details now. And again, we can pause at any time for questions, but I'll try to move through a few slides and then we can open the discussion. This slide is a summary of everything related to state legislation that we were advocating for and tracking in our budget for next year. Some of these things we had knowledge about at the time that the budget was passed, and some of these we continued to track. As we all know, the timing can be difficult. Our budget's in April, city is in May, state often happens in June. So the first piece here was that excess cost grant. That was something we knew about at the time, and so we included in the budget the additional revenue for excess cost at about 1.3 million. This also was reflected in FY25 as that began this year. The second piece is what I want to talk about today, which is this special education grant that was passed last week. How this grant is designed, and I have more detail on the next slide, is a 50% weight for special education in the form of a grant. So again, total funding for that would be 16 million for the first year. The state is planning to fund that in a way that would translate to 3.4 million for us. And this is where we had assumed 5. It's actually closer to 3.4 relative to that one specific piece of legislation. There was also a few other pieces of legislative advocacy we were tracking. One was the cap on general education magnet tuition. So this year, FY25, was the first year that that cap went in place. And it's essentially 12 million in costs we don't incur. So $12 million worth of tuition costs that we do not pay because of the cap. We had assumed this in the budget. We had already accounted for it. And then we got word that that will be continuing for next year. Another piece was the full funding of ECS. So this is over time. The state has been phasing in that funding formula. It is now next year going to be fully funded. That was about 6 million more for us, but again, already accounted for when we did our initial projections. And then the final piece was just around the opportunities for new programs related to special education, pilot programs to help retain students and serve them better. That's in the governor's budget for FY27. So no impact next year, but it's something we're thinking about and planning for. So just wanted to give you the full landscape of where we're at with state legislation. Something happened on all of these fronts that was in a positive direction for us. So I do think that that is exciting. But the specific focus right now is on that update related to the special education grant, because that's where we had made an assumption, and then the reality is slightly different from that.
Caitlin, if I can jump in really
Yeah,
quick.
please.
As everyone can see here, we've got a list of 5 items that we were advocating for in some way, shape, or form. There were a lot of numbers here, a lot of assumptions here. And I just want to say that we had heard different numbers throughout the session from lobbyists, from various folks that we talked to. And while I think we all thought that there was additional funding in that second line item, there, very well could have been just some confusion around the fact that there are 5 very big priorities here that we were working on that had very big dollar amounts attached to them. So while yes, we did assume the $5 million, I think we were all, I can't speak for everyone. I was on the, I felt that it was a very solid assumption based on the information that we got, but also very, we very well could have just been like crossing paths on kind of some of these other numbers as well. So grateful for the 3.4 million that we got. But I just wanted to say that out loud, because there's just a lot of stuff, a lot of, just a lot of advocacy around this work that everyone was doing. And it was all really important work, and we're just really grateful that we got to where we are today. Sorry. Thank you.
No, I'm glad you said it. And assumptions are assumptions is my other takeaway on that. And so the real meaningful work is just doing the best we can with the information we have at the time, and then updating once we have more information. So totally agree.
Can I also say how important it is that we were transparent throughout the entire process about engaging with community and others to join in the advocacy, and being very transparent about the assumptions that were being made throughout, right, since the beginning at all levels, in our community meetings, in our budget forums, with you all as our board, in all of the budget related conversations, at the MARB full meeting, at the subcommittee, right? We led with transparency at all levels, city council. So I think that was all not just important relative to the outcome, I think that you see here, but also in how the community was able to work together, because I do think they had a deeper understanding of our budget. And that only happens when you are transparent and share all of the information that you have throughout the process.
And so, in spirit of transparency, this is everything we know about the special education bill. And again, there's still work to do because this is new to figure out all of the details. But what we do know is that the bill that passed, it does include a weight, like I mentioned, for 50%, which is exactly what we were advocating for. For next year, there's $30 million total across the state allocated for it. And specifically, it's for special education related services to support students. So teachers, paraeducators, reading specialists, equipment, maintenance, curricular. So within special education, kind of a broad category of things this grant can be used for. And also in the bill, there's kind of penalties around if the funds are not used for special education, because it is a special education bill. And if the budgeted appropriation for special education from one year to the next isn't at least as much as the grant amount. So I did want to share as well that our special education budget for next year is set to increase by about $16 million. And if you take out tuition, it's $4.4 million. So we certainly are increasing the appropriation to special education. It's actually one of the drivers of our deficit, right, is to keep up with the rising costs. We have the teacher raises for next year. We have the paraprofessional, which most of those are special education paraprofessional raises. So we are tracking kind of to ensure that we would meet those criteria, although we seek any additional clarity we get about specifically what it can be used for, or if we are understanding that language correctly. It will translate to the initial estimate is 3.4 million for us. And again, that's where there's that difference from what we assumed, but still very grateful we will be getting those dollars. I will say there's also, as a part of this, is rate setting with approval by the legislature and data reporting related to private providers. And so we actually don't have an estimate or an assumption right now on what that could translate to for us because it feels a bit nebulous at this time of what exactly that will look like. But it is an area of promise because this is increased revenue, but if there's also a component of this that is cost monitoring or at least leveling out costs, as special education is something that increases every year, there is the potential that down the line this could translate to reduced costs or at least less costs than we would have predicted would increase in the future. So I think on that front and on the front of the legislature, I believe does intend to increase the allocation to this grant over time. There is the potential that this could translate to both more revenue and more savings for us in the long term. Again, we're not making any assumptions related to that right now. It's something we're going to have to track over the course of next year as we work on the FY27 budget. But I did want to name there's even more future potential here likely than just what's going to happen in FY26. The one other piece I just wanted to speak to was we also got news last week on that general education tuition cap and just wanted to reiterate that's going to be sustained. That was already assumed in our budget, and that's $12 million worth of costs we won't incur. And so we're also grateful for that. Even though we assumed it and it happened, we are very grateful that those are 12 million of costs that we will not have to include in our budget for next year. I think I'll pause there because that is the state portion, and then I want to get into city, but I'll open it up there just to see if there's any questions, comments on this special education bill or anything related to it. Okay, I'll keep going on the city because then we can look at the full picture of this together. So on the city funding, on the left, you have kind of what is the money available, and then on the right is how could this money be used? And what we really want to decide on today is what is the path moving forward with the additional dollars so that we can vote on an amended budget. So in terms of money coming from the city, there's 1.5 million more in just city funds. There is also that 3 million cost savings that would be associated with consolidating shared services across the city and the board. We can have more of a discussion on this. I know obviously we would want this to be a very thoughtful process. We would want to be able to plan in a way that this actually is a meaningful set of efficiencies or cost savings that works for both sides. But with that total of 4.5 million, the uses of that, one is around mitigating that gap in the lower than anticipated than state funding. So that 1.6 million gap between the 3.4 and the 5. And then there's a request from the city related to specific restored programs that would total about 2.7 million. That includes the dental clinics. It includes all community school lead agency funding that was cut from the budget. Again, we kept anything that was grant funded. We cut anything that was general funded. So 1 million would be a full restoration of those lead agency funding. 0.5 million for Ready CT and CT Rise, which are our 9th grade academies and on track career pathway work. And then 0.7 million for Opportunity Academy. And so overall, what the goal would be is using 1.5 of those city funds to restore some of those programs, then leveraging the cost savings to restore the additional ones and close that gap in the state funding assumption. There's a $0.2 million difference between those numbers. So we can talk about that if we want to leave it as a buffer, if there's a couple more things we would add. But overall, that would be the plan related to city, or the proposed plan related to the city funding. And what that would, and jump in at any point, but what that would translate to, just so you see the full picture of the state and the city side by side. Lots of numbers here. I'm going to talk it through. So this is actually the first column here. The first two columns is part of what we originally shared when we passed the budget. So it said we made this many reductions. We know we're getting 3 million from the city. We are assuming 5 from the state. And then we are making a set of high risk reductions. That's what got us to the 30 million. You now see the updated numbers here, and then the difference between what we originally said in the budget and what we now have access to. And so to talk that through on the city front, we're getting the 1.5 additional from the city. So you see that going from 3 to 4.5. You then see mitigation through cost savings generated through shared services. That was not something we originally had in the budget. In adding it, that adds 3 million to what we're able to use to mitigate. And then on the state funding, you see that difference of we assumed 5, we're getting 3.4, which translates to a difference of 1.6. And then finally, you can see if for those high risk reductions, if we restore that 2.7 million, you can see the update there. So these are how all the numbers work together. Like I said, there's a $0.2 million difference there, where we could think about, are there a couple more things we would restore? But that's where you can see the balancing out, is that we have some more money from the city, more money from cost savings and consolidated services, less money from the state, and then money we would use to restore programs is what's adding up to get us back to that balance. And then finally, and then we can pause for any questions. This is just a recap of those high risk reductions. So you can see what we had originally reduced, what we had proposed, and then now with the request from the city, the specific items that would be restored. So you can see that first column is what we reduced from each of these items. The second column are the proposed restoration. That was kind of in order of what you see on the slide. And then finally, we have what the city is requesting. So that's where you can see the full restoration of community school lead funding, of Opportunity Academy, Ready CT and CT Rise, and then the dental clinic portion, which is the 2 dentists and 2 dental assistants, that gets us to that 2.7 million. I will now pause. I know there's a lot of numbers, but definitely want to open it up to any questions or discussion.
If I can jump in really quick, Caitlin, because I feel like every day I learn a little bit more and I'm a little bit smarter than I was the day before or 5 minutes before. One thing that I just wanted to point out, because I didn't realize this, is that we have the student support and success centers here and also Hope Academy. Those were not eliminated. Those services were just reduced. And I did not appreciate that. So I don't know, maybe I could have been the only one, but just know that those services still exist for folks, just at a different level. Yeah, so with that, I will turn it over for questions. Mr. Walker.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks, Chair. So I think you've just I guess to reiterate, so Hope Academy, oh my God, I can't believe I'm saying, so Hope isn't gone.
Hope is not lost.
You're right. I hate to say it that way. So, all right. So what we're saying, but it still looks like Hope and the success centers are operating at a reduced level.
It's reduced.
That's true.
Correct. And I can add, I could add.
Can you be
column.
explicit as to
Yeah.
what that means, CFO Richard?
Yeah, yes, I
Okay.
can. And I can also pull in the column that has the full amount of these. But essentially the student support and success centers, there was 4 roles at each site that has that program, and now they each have 3 roles. So that was that reduction across the sites. And then Hope Academy, I believe we reduced that from 1.4 million down to the 0.5 million. So that's where we reduced 0.9 million from it. But both exist. The student support and success centers have 3 roles at each site instead of 4 for like academic counseling, graduation support, etc. And then Hope has gone from a 1.4 million investment to a 0.5 million investment.
Secondary question. I want to lift up, I guess, on behalf of my fellow board members, who pointed out that the board had their own priority list. And so the coaching positions, in terms of maybe that 0.2 or what any additional funds could be used for, a couple of board members have brought up that the coaching or athletics should be a priority. I think in the belief that they directly touch students in that way. So I'll give that comment. And yeah,
And I would say, just for clarity, there were no reductions to middle school athletics. Like
Athletics
I
is
do
there, yeah.
Yeah, because we had put that on the list as it's an area we could reduce, but when we heard from you all that was, I think it was the #1 priority.
Yes.
There was no reduction. So I just want to make that clear that
okay, that's want to be clear, because to me that seemed to come back a couple times. That was a top
It
priority.
came back up, and I think we might have confused people because it was on the list, but the reduction was $0. So
okay,
been a
all right.
confusion. There was no reduction there.
Then I will end there. Thanks for that clarification then.
And CFO Richard, we should probably do a call-out box on this slide that these were also based on the board's prioritization.
Yes, that is the order. Okay, we can add that.
Mr. Tatum?
Also, just to build on that clarity, the line for central-based coaching positions, that is not athletic coaching. That's like academic teacher,
It's like instructional support.
instructional support coaching. Yeah, right.
We'll clarify that as well, Mr. Tatum.
Yeah, that word
True.
makes people think athletics if they aren't aware of
That's
them.
so fair. Yeah, that's like an
Yep.
education thing. Yep. Okay.
Yep. But my question is about the $3 million in like cost savings through efficiencies. I mean, I have a lot of questions, mostly because I don't have much knowledge of what those things might be, and based on not fully understanding like what happens at the city. So first, like if there are any examples of like what kinds of efficiencies there might theoretically be, I would love to hear those. And then kind of related to that, it seems I'd like to better understand like whether we can really count that money as if it's like funds that are available, because it seems like there would be quite a process of realizing like savings when we're talking about consolidating services. Like, what does that mean for the work that people do? What does that mean for the jobs? What does that mean for, like, it doesn't seem like money that would just become available quickly. And so what does it mean for our budgeting process to like just throw it in with money that is available to us soon? Like, is that a prudent thing to do? So yeah, if there are any examples of what that could possibly be, I would love to hear those. And then process wise, like, can we really consider that as additional money that we have available, given that it will probably take some time to actually realize those savings?
I can start talking about some of the conversations that have happened in the past relative to some types of services. And I know that Chairperson Hockenhall and I were talking about reaching out to Kate, so she can kind of speak to that. But in the past, there's been conversations about buildings and grounds, perhaps some aspects of finance, even HR, legal services as well. There was a time in which Hartford Public Schools, the city, supported with legal services, and that shifted. And so, right, we now have internal counsel, but those are all the items that I'm aware of. Chairperson Hockenhall, I don't know if even from your time, at the city, if you had any other items.
I can jump in really quick. So I think Dr. Torres Rodriguez, what you said is kind of, all things to consider, and definitely doing it thoughtfully is the goal here. I think the thought is that we wouldn't see savings really for the first half of the year. It might be for the second half of the year that we would see savings. I did literally, while we were on this call, because it's been on my list for weeks to do, is to reach out to CABE, because during budget season, there were a bunch of emails going back and forth, just with people throughout Connecticut sharing successes, and I shouldn't call them failures, but successes and lessons learned on some shared service work that was done. So I reached out to CABE just today to ask them if they have any information that they can share with us, so that we don't have to recreate the wheel, but we can kind of build upon that and see how we can use it with the city and the Board of Ed going forward. But definitely making sure it's a thoughtful process, not just doing it for doing its sake and learning later. I think that people have done it throughout Connecticut and throughout the United States. We're not the first, so hopefully we can learn and we can talk through those. So definitely something operationally that the city and the board will and by the board, I don't necessarily think it's us. I definitely think it's kind of the internal team at the school and the city to have those conversations first. So, Mr. Tatum, does that answer your question? Did you have any more on that?
No, it begins to. I think it's certainly worth looking into. I think I'm cautiously optimistic is too strong a word for what I am about that in the budget at this point, just given my sense of things. But it's certainly worth looking into, and would be glad to. I would love, what you said, that information that CABE might have of what has worked in other places, I think would be great so that we can, instead of sort of under duress coming up with a way to find 3 million in efficiencies, which to me sounds more like we're going to do jobs less well because we're having to make cuts. If there are examples of people who are like, yeah, we consolidated this and it works well, I would love to hear that. What I'm nervous about is that there's now pressure to create $3 million in savings between the city and the board, which just to me sounds like more cuts. So I'm open-minded to being proven wrong and excited about ways that some of those services might be able to be delivered more efficiently. And I'm apprehensive.
Thank you. Yeah, and once I get that information, I'll absolutely share it just so that we can start thinking about it. But I hear what you're saying. Appreciate that. Mr. Walker?
Thank you, Chair. I share Board Member Tatum's concern, but I think since we're talking about assumptions, the $3 million needs to stay there because the city has put this forward, and so what I'm saying is I didn't see this as homework for us. We need to partner, but the city is the entity that said that they will help find these consolidations. And so I don't want to, I will say that we can identify some risk around it, but I think we won't get there if we don't have this assumption out there and kind of nudge the folks who promise to do it to really follow up and put the mental energy in, as was suggested by the superintendent. Some of this can be as simple as the city picking up the service. I would hope this isn't job cutting, that this is literally the city saying we can take on, as you suggested, grounds or legal or some other function that we currently have on our balance sheet. So I'm just saying to keep the assumption, but maybe to address Board Member Tatum's concern, let's just kind of detail out what this assumption is, and as you go on, we just add risk to it if parties aren't following up as they have suggested.
Walker. Mrs. Estrada Perez.
Hello. I think for me, one of the things I wanted to bring up is that I think what's going to be important about those 3 million, especially because we don't know exactly where those cost savings are going to come from. And we don't know like line items, what they're going to be, whether it's legal, whether it's HR. What would be really helpful, because I also have a little bit of same fear that Board Member Tatum shared. And for transparency and accountability's sake, is once you get that list, it's really important for us to know. But I also think once the city and and HPS and us, however we decide to go about this, figure out what those are, having a list of what those are, so that so that we know exactly where those 3 millions came from and what those cost savings are and what those fields and those spaces are. So if it's legal, if it's HR, that we have a list so that we can say this is where it's coming from, and so that it's easily understandable. Because otherwise it does kind of read it's just for transparency's sake, I think it's a better way to understand how we're doing these cost sharings, what departments, how it's being done, and that is actually being done and how it's supporting, right? Instead of just cutting, and that it's still being done well, with intention. So I think that will be helpful to understand in the future as we move through it. I
Thank
hope
you
that
for
makes
that. Yeah, thanks, Mr. Perez. And actually, Mr. Mills, you have your hand raised. I'm going to call on you next. But also, can you talk to that fancy in-kind report that I know that you do that talks about the services that the city provides to the schools? Because I think that this will be more things that will feed into that report. And Mr. Mills is the expert here because he used to actually do this report. So, Mr. Mills, I'll get you.
Once upon a time, Jen Hockenhall, when she was my boss, made me do this incredibly time-consuming report that talked about how we shared services with different entities across the school system and city and all these other things. It is a pain in the butt, but she was my boss, so I had no choice. But so essentially, there is an in-kind report that we are mandated to do, and we give it to the state, and it details all of the different relationships that the city either gives to the library or the school system, that we don't charge them for, that the school system would otherwise have to pay for. So it's like the in-kind services. So there's already sort of a list of services that we share. A lot of them are like legal. Some of them are like public works, shoveling snow on school grounds. So these things do already exist. And it's pretty comprehensive. I'm sure I can find the latest copy. I don't have to do it anymore, but somebody has to do it still. So that exists. We do share services already. So, sort of you guys can put your minds at ease a little bit. Is already sort of precedent around that. I guess another thing I wanted to share is that Jen and I had already sort of worked on this a little bit early in the year, talking to specifically like the operations and grounds department with the school system, talking about how we could share those types of services with the city. So, we've already sort of been thinking about that and how to do it with sort of with intent, but also in a manner that doesn't remove services from either entity. There are ways in which we could share services if done properly and done with, if we research it ahead of time. So not that there isn't cause to concern, but there are ways in which we can do this that doesn't result in us losing services or any other objects like that. So this is a thing that we sort of already had talked about. And I've mentioned this a couple times sort of throughout the year, that there are a bunch of city services that we already sort of provide, that we could do more of. For instance, like health clinics, like HHS does have a clinic on Coventry Street, so they could assist in terms of that. So I think my biggest question is how much of this sort of endeavor will we get to lead versus other entities sort of telling us that these are the services that we want to consolidate. And I think that, my knowledge and Chair Hockenall's knowledge of just how the city works can really be an asset during this time period because, Jen was the budget director forever and I was a budget analyst forever. So I think we do sort of we're in a really good spot in so much that multiple board members know a lot about how the city runs. So I think if we really want to do this, we just sort of have to make sure that we have a say. Not that I think we wouldn't, but I think it's important that we sort of drive it as opposed to being told the drivers. The end.
Thanks, Board Member Mills, and I echo what Board Member Mills says about that. I'm excited that the city is really open to having these conversations as well. I think, if we can save money, do it responsibly and do it thoughtfully, I think it'll just make us a stronger group together as well. Dr. Torres Rodriguez, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, just something for you all to consider is a phased approach in the studying the impact that the shared services would have in parallel to the cadence of the school system. So we know that before the budget process kicks off in December, that might be a great time to assess impact. For example, if you're examining finance services, if you're examining legal services, I know Chairperson Hockenhall, you and I talked, and I'm already, my homework is to dig into past practices as to how those services came about before the school year kind of ramps up. So just chunking it out, I guess, given that, the school system is going to gear up to start and to do it, as you're saying, Mr. Mills, so that everyone is aware of the impact around implementation.
Thank you. Mrs. Estrada Perez.
I just wanted to say, thank you, Board Member Mills. That was really helpful. And yeah, I will be curious to know how we can lead some of that work as well. And love the fact that it already exists, and wondering how we can best, pull it and utilize it so that we are able to share it with community and folks in a way that is understandable and that it makes sense to all of us. To everyone's point, so that we are informed, but also like collective is informed, parents are informed, and we know what's happening. So just so I appreciate that it already exists, and that you all have knowledge that we've already shared that, and how we can do it again, and sort of paying attention to making sure that we're the drivers of it, and then making sure how do we communicate that out in a way that is simple for folks, including self, So thank you. That was really helpful.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion around the budget amendment?
I think to be explicit, what we would bring in terms of the amendment for next Wednesday would be inclusive of the update in city funds, update in state funds, this cost savings mitigation, and then these specific programs. So just wanted to make explicit that's what we would bring, kind of the bottom line number there, with like the clarification on this is what has changed from the last time.
Your team?
I think that was exactly my question. So you're gonna present us essentially what you've shared with us today, with those updates in the budget from what we've realized in terms of revenue, and the sort of acceptance of those funds from the city for these purposes.
Exactly. So it would be similar to when you did the initial vote, it's on like that bottom line number. So you would have the updated number you're voting on for revenue and expense, but then we'll include, to your point, the details of here is exactly what is different relative to revenue, relative to costs from last time.
Yes.
I might have missed this, but to our esteemed CFO Richard over there, what are we projecting to finish the year with? Like, are we projecting, like, how, I guess, like, what's the final number? Are we gonna have like a deficit for this year?
Yeah, we did that in the FY25 piece, but we're now projecting about a $2 million deficit for this year. It is down from the last update at 4 million, and we're still looking, to track that as we get closer to the end of the year. But right now we stand at about $2 million is what we're estimating for this year.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Slides that you have to go through?
Yes, I did make it through all my slides. So I feel like we're explicit on kind of the next step. So I think that's what we needed at least to move forward for the board meeting next week.
All right, any further questions, comments, discussion before we end the meeting?
I think one comment just for the public, after the board meeting next week, right, internally on the management side, we'll move forward with letting people know that, things are fully officially restored, if you will. So it'll be important for us to get through the next board meeting, so that there's a lot of still people kind of holding on to uncertainty.
For that.
Sorry, just on that point, like, for the sake of transparency, I think like we have already made several reductions to things. And so like the idea, like communicating the idea that things are fully restored is maybe a little bit of a misleading statement. And so just be mindful of like what really is being restored, and include the mitigation that happened in that
Totally.
In that communication.
What has already been totally been restored. Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Yep, thank you.
And it is also, right, we'll have communication ready to go for the morning after, because we also have, families and others that are wondering where things, landed.
Yep, thank you.
All right, seeing no other hands, thank you everyone. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you to the board members for joining us, staff for joining us, and thank you to the public for watching today. We hope that you found this informative and we